I just wanted to re-presence as we move into this week, which is on life design and designing Odyssey years and prototyping, some really powerful stuff that I think is really potentially transformative, that we stay grounded in that non-reactive present awareness, that hopefully the morning pages are giving us an opportunity to just show up and not judge ourselves or not judge where we are in a way that can bleed over into other aspects of our lives. So I just don't want to, if we're measuring like how much synchronicity or what synchronicities happened this week, that we're able to hold ourselves lightly. And maybe that's by understanding air energy and retrograde, or that we just need to be eating or sleeping better, or whatever it is, to just be hopefully compassionate and have that non-judgmental awareness as we move forward. Okay. I'm curious how things are going beyond the network, as apparently
beyond everybody having technical issues.
Struggling. Anything that happened this last week that was synchronistic or interesting?
I had fun on my artist date last week.
Amazing.
I actually did two. I did two artist dates.
Amazing.
One of them was actually a date that I took myself on, which was fantastic. Because I was in Greeley for a client picking stuff for design, and then I drove by on my way to it and saw this restaurant that my friend owns that I have never been to. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to go see it and let her know how adorable it is and see how great it's doing. And it was wonderful. And I I ordered a whole pizza and had 2 slices because you could only order a whole pizza. But it was super fun. Sat at the bar and talked to people next to me. That's one of my favorite things to do, is talk to strangers. So that was great. And then I took myself up to, or I went with a friend up to see the colors on Saturday up in the hills, and took a bunch of pictures. And he was like, these are really great pictures. And I kind of remembered that I used to love photography, and I set it down my camera in, I think, high school because I couldn't develop the film right. Like I screwed up the film every time I tried to develop it. So then I decided I was no good, and I set down my camera, which is kind of sad. So he's like, you don't have to worry about developing film anymore. Go pick up your camera, get busy. So I thought that was fun, a fun little discovery that I kind of forgot about.
It's neat.
Amazing. It's awesome.
I don't know if you guys can hear me because my internet connection is such shit, but if you can,
we have you.
I rather enjoyed what I did as a noticing journal. I think somebody said that, maybe it was you, Sean, just like a noticing journal.
Yep.
And it's just as helpful to write down the stuff you're noticing. And some of it was weird, and some of it was super synchronous, and some of it is like, what does that mean? And I don't know, it was just a good little way to write without kind of having to write anything big.
Love it.
So that was my experience.
I had some things come up with growth and fixed mindset this morning that were really interesting, and other thinking about leadership development, facilitation, and what leadership actually means. So I continue to kind of be pulled into different, I don't want to say different directions, but this work is leading into interesting areas that I'm trying to pay attention to and notice where I'm getting more curious about things. Leadership development is the one that's coming up, training the trainer. What does it mean to be a good facilitator? What does it mean to be a good leader? I'm also rethinking about entrepreneurialism and intrapreneurialism, how to help people become better entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, and how that works out. So that was some of the content that came up for me that was interesting this week that I didn't expect. I also did the human design from the Jovian archives.
Love it. Yes. Okay.
people who love it. I don't know whether or not I love it yet, but some
Nice.
things in it did get me thinking in a way that I found very helpful. So that was a random one for me. And I'm still on like their second email, and it's all free, which is nice. But that was some of the content for me that was synchronistic.
What's your type? What are you?
I would need to look at it. I can't remember.
Generator, projector, reflector? Generator.
So yeah, one of my other student in a previous class raved about human design, and yeah, so that's interesting. That might be interesting. I also have just been diving deeper into the book on play that I'm into. So I've been thinking a lot more about play and how play, which connects to what we're doing this week as well. Okay.
Great.
Kristina, do you want to say hi to people? It's good to see you again.
Hello, everyone. As far as synchronicity, I think one thing I noticed was don't judge a book by its cover. I was hanging out with a friend's two little daughters while he was playing in a band over the weekend, because the little girl's mother passed away last year, and he's like, will you be their emergency contact while I'm playing? And so we did graffiti in a tree house at this restaurant, Avo's, which was mostly hearts and butterflies, which was awesome. But the older of the two, who is just 8, just was saying over and over, don't judge a book by its cover. And it's just been coming up all week. And that just means what it means, right? And the other synchronicity is that I think it was good that I wasn't part of this group last week, because I would have been too dark and distracting. And it was really a great, powerful, and heavy, because I was feeling heavy too, class to watch later after you all did it. So thank you all for your vulnerability and your presentness last week. And it did benefit me after I watched it. And I am just astounded by all of our ability to show up for transformation and go through this process. It's really hard and scary, but I think we all would agree there's no going back. And that's where I am today. I know that, I just have to show up, and I'm going to get there. And I also know this about myself. I was writing about this morning, that all through my life, I create crisis when I'm in a big time of transformation. And so I think I'm right there right now, kind of making crises bigger and focusing on the negative, because that's my way to deal with the fear of this transformation that I'm in. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to continue to show up and try to make time for play and follow my agreements with the contract. And let's do this. And also thank you, Sean and Jeannie and Candace, for letting me spew on you yesterday.
So I do have to, I feel like I need to interject that every time I'm just very wary of toxic positivity. And a lot of this course is veering almost uncomfortably close to like, oh, we're just going right to the good life. And let's all be happy with noticing the synchronicities, where it really, I do think is really important to be vulnerable. And I applaud you, Kristina, for reaching out and having that conversation yesterday. I know we might believe like, oh my God, I don't want to like spew, interesting verb, all this negativity onto another person, where, I mean, thank you for being considerate, but also it's just a processing of our experience, right? And I do think what's so interesting is don't judge a book by its cover is also our experiences as well. And I know for me, when I get depressed and I judge that depression by its cover, so to speak, I'm like, fuck this, I don't want to be depressed. I'm not a depressed person. Ego engaged, whatever. Samantha's still having trouble getting up. It's more
Also-
interesting to be curious, basically.
Mhm.
So yeah, sorry, Kristina.
No, it's just, I know it's necessary and temporary discomfort.
Yeah.
Right? As
Yeah.
creatives. And we have to show up to that.
Yeah.
I want to say what else was interesting for me this week, and I just think sometimes the universe works in this way. The number of people who reached out to me to share kind of a lot of shit, honestly. And for me to be in an okay space to process all that. Sometimes I'm not, I'm like, get my shield up. But for whatever reason, I was in an okay space in this last week to take on that stuff. And maybe that's exactly what was meant to happen. You know, maybe Kristina, you were exactly meant to spew your shit on me because I was able to receive it. Right. And to know then that I was in a good space to take you on and have your back, and, you know, that those things may ebb and flow in the exact balance that they were meant to ebb and flow in.
So I called this at the beginning of the course kind of big patience, and being willing to be patient in the big long term of things rather than wanting them to work out. What's interesting is that 7 weeks is actually like a really small chunk of time. It always feels kind of like a big chunk of time when you're inside of it, but it really is, it's a small chunk of time. What I want to do, because I want to actually move to shift to writing, and I'm going to reset my system in hopes that that might help Samantha get on if it's for some reason on my end. So I'm going to kind of jump off the meeting once I give us our free writing prompt, and we'll get back together to discuss here in about 15 minutes, 32 after. But the question is kind of, you know, where are we, or where do we go from here? Where are we? I think the other interesting thing that came up today is meditation on the heart. So where's my heart? Kind of get out of our head or our narratives about what's going on, thinking about where we are emotionally. And then kind of we're beginning to explore where could we go from here. The most fun and interesting prompt on this is imagine 3 different future lives that you could lead. So 3 radically different lives that you could lead moving forward. And in those 3 lives, this is the first writing prompt for the Odyssey year. So we're going to kind of get a jump start on the first major prompt because it's a big one. If you imagine 3 future lives, one being things basically stay the same. We can hear you now, Samantha. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm using my cell phone. That's the only way it's working, so that's right.
Okay, I'm gonna still jump off the meeting and get back on, I think. While you're here, maybe I won't do that. Okay, 1, things are the same, basically. So if you just imagine your typical, like, where am I going? This is like our normal path forward. The second one that they encourage you is what your future would be if money or appearance were no issue.
It's interesting. Appearance is part
Like
of it.
fame, how people see you.
Okay.
So like I might, and I am seriously considering being an interpretive dancer. I don't know how well that would fit with my existing brand I have going online.
I understand. Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Appearance, like as in physical.
And you will not believe the seed that I'm working on. It is a beautiful physical portrayal of human growth. No, okay. So that's what I mean by appearance, status, reputation, Thank you for clarifying. If appearance slash status slash reputation were no thing. Okay, and then the third one that they ask you to consider is what you would do if everything you had been doing, it's like the polar opposite of one. If everything you had been doing were taken away. So I'm a teacher. If all of a sudden there was no more teaching, if everything that, or if you're basically the position that you have had, no more people buy those things. What would that look like? What would you do if you had to start over completely on something? What would you do? I really like, these are both called Odyssey plans, and they want us to think about 3 to 5 years in the future. So not like, so actually you have some time to build it up. You might move to Costa Rica and start a surf camp for children is the other, example that they give. But the third one is what you would do if you couldn't do what you're doing now. And you had to quote unquote start over. 3 different paths potentially forward. And if you want, you could brainstorm a bunch. So this could just be like wild, random brainstorming. But 1, things basically generally stay the same, how this is going to work out. 2, what you would do if there was no worries about money or reputation, status, appearance. 3, what you would do if the things that you would normally think about doing, you couldn't do it at all. If you're a teacher, you couldn't teach, so on and so forth. Cool? And that took about 4 minutes to describe. So let's go until 12:36 now, about 14 minutes. Samantha, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Okay, cool. We'll see everybody in 15, or we'll talk in 15. Okay. Samantha, I did also want to say that I talked to Kristina yesterday and she thought you were the most amazing person. And I agreed.
Thank you.
True to my style, I said, I think I'm in love with you.
Really? Oh gosh.
Yep.
Notice you're getting the room all agrees. Well, I thought that I should mention that because it's true. I think this is an amazing group of people, but
I've been contemplating coming to visit you in London.
I might as well make it a class trip.
that would be amazing.
I think that was my number 2 choice that I wrote about.
Someone did reach out to me randomly, now that you mentioned that, from Clubhouse on if you want to do a wisdom workshop at our green retreat in Bali. Here's here's the pictures of the thing. Drop dead gorgeous. He's like, if you're interested in pursuing a collaboration, let me know. And I'm like,
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Yes, is the answer to that one. Wow.
I should note that.
Assistant, if you need an assistant, I'm.
Yeah, yeah, always. That's right.
I have the time.
Bunch of facilitators right here. Yeah. Well,
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's funny. I did one of the, thinking about building this and developing this and thinking about training the trainer. I think it's really important that if I am able to scale this and turn this into a source of employment for other people, that people that have gone through the course feel like that would be a requirement to be a facilitator, is to have gone through it. So maybe in 2 or 3 years, you all be making money leading your own workshops. I have no idea if that's any interest to any of that. It's terrible kind of joke. That's one of my Odyssey plans, is to be like a CEO of a sprawling future of education network.
do it.
Why not?
I don't know. It came up before. I don't know. I don't want to make this about me. This is the 6th
But
time.
that's
I've taken this
interesting.
class.
That little hesitation that you just had is very interesting because that resonates with me. You're like, I don't know, like what's behind that?
Personally, I am having too much fun with what I'm doing already. So when I did the like what I'm doing if things don't change, and then I did the what would I do if money weren't an issue, my answer for what I would do if money weren't an issue was very similar to what I'm doing right now, which tells me that I don't know that I really want the stress of being CEO, Sean, as much as I'm curious about that path. I don't know. I think and it does tie into where we're going this week, because I do think it's interesting for me to think about how I might play with that potentially when I have more time, when it's not during the academic year, to really actually step into, trying to do some strategic hiring and some long-term planning and, white paper writing. There's some things I could do that I think would put me more in that, what it would be like to be a CEO, but I just don't really know if that's me. I think I need to really explore that.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, nah, I don't know. Is that like am I buying into this cultural narrative that it would be awesome to be the CEO of a future of education company? Or would it be awesome to just like do TikTok videos about books that I love? That sounds pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, what Kristina just said, don't call it CEO, then maybe the idea of what a CEO is, right? What a CEO is, that's like making you hesitate even from dreaming about it, just because you're like, oh no, if I would be that, then I would be stressed all the time. I wouldn't have this. Would there be a way to not be that? That's just stuff I've been working on. So when you said that, I was like, wow, okay. That's
the perfect time for a hybrid professional title. Sean, I don't know if everyone knows Sarah Beth.
Yeah.
This is the perfect time for it, to come up with your own. sort of title.
When I did the work with Sarah Beth Burke, it was learning adventure guide when I did my first little tiny workshop with her. By the way, this is probably a reference that nobody except Samantha and I are getting. Her name's Sarah Beth Burke.
Yeah, no, I've been in all of those rooms.
Oh, and Suzanne. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I forgot that we're, so yes, she's really fascinating. I actually met with her in person. She's in Colorado, and she is in the world of hybrid professionals that actually might be relevant to other people in the room. People that are actually have expertise in 2 different fields and overlap them.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks. I do think that's interesting to consider. And this came up actually in a room with Joan Ball as well, who's an amazing, just how, you know, how much do I want to be a teacher to the masses, and how much do I want to do these boutique small learning groups? You know, I found for me, it's promoting my mental health. And this is what I got from the human design thing. When I'm not trying to push to make something, I'm just kind of responding to what I feel like is needed. Like this came out of a need that I had, a very real need. And it seems like it's serving for other people what I needed.
Mhm.
And I'm okay with that. Like I want this to be what it is in a mental health standpoint, rather than me being like, where's the business to business contracts? Where's the corporate clients? Where's the grant writing? You know what I mean? Which who knows?
Who knows?
Oh yes, thank you, Samantha. Okay, enough about me. Like I said, this is the 6th time I've taken this course, although it does, I think, maybe break the ice. Does anybody else, and Samantha, actually I'd want to give priority to you since we didn't hear you speak earlier. If you want to lead in with anything that happened last week or this week, or you can pass.
Anything that happened this week, I think for me, the biggest thing was learning about the virtue ethics, Aristotle, from the room. And then I said, he really made things very complicated. As because like I know nothing about philosophy, and I was like, fine, let me just find out what this is about. And then the person sent me like a 1-pager of what virtue ethics is, and it's just like basically doing the morally correct thing and living a virtuous life. And how you learn about living a virtuous life is by seeing and being around others who are living the virtuous life in the circumstances that you are currently in. And I was like, this is so circular. Exactly. And then it made me think about like when we're growing up, you know, we kind of have a sense of what's wrong or right. Like a baby will pretend to be asleep, not to eat, like have any medicine when they're ill. How does a baby already know that they can do that? It's like, are we born with a certain amount of like consciousness of like what's wrong, what's right? And then as we grow up, we get those values and beliefs instilled in us by our parents, and then we now make our own decisions of what's wrong and what's right. So it made me think like, how do we know if there was no law, if there was no this, how would we know we're doing the right thing?
Wow.
Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing for me of this past week.
Wow.
Like our internal compass, like when was it calibrated for us before we got kind of thrown off calibration?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's super interesting that you brought up virtues. Sometimes when I can't think of something to write, I use the Proust questionnaire. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but it's a questionnaire of all these different questions. And question number 8, I picked a random number, and my question one day was, what do you consider to be the most overrated virtue? And I hadn't really, I mean, I don't sit around and think about virtues a lot, but I wrote a little bit about being industrious, because I think being industrious, doing work for the sake of work, is horribly overrated. And yeah, you found it in Vanity Fair. That's where I picked it up a long time ago, and I think it's really fun to do with your friends. Although I did do it with a boyfriend one time and realized we needed to break up. It was sad.
That's a great like first or second date kind of thing. I like it.
Yeah, but I didn't do it till a year in, and then I was like, oh, we're done.
Sunk cost fallacy. No, just
But anyway, yeah, the virtues thing is really interesting, and I'm having dog issues. So if I go on and off, you can probably hear him right now, maybe. But anyway, if I go on and off camera, he's acting like an idiot today. But anyway, so yeah, that was one of my interesting things to think about this week too. I didn't respond when we were talking about what happened this week because I didn't have a good week. Like it wasn't a good week, and today's it's on the upswing again. But it's just a really hard week, and so I'm actually behind. I started watching the class from last week and didn't watch it. It was too hard. I had to stop, and I'm planning to do it tonight. You know, just patience and pacing has become really important. Yeah. I'll be back. I've got to go attend to that beast.
And attending to the beasts. Awesome. And Kyle's back.
Kyle's joining.
Other reactions. There's a lot I could say about virtue ethics and how that plays out. And I think that's actually pretty relevant. So I might do something on that, thinking about the philosophy of that. But I want to hear other people's Odyssey plans, or Kyle, to get us kind of the Freewrite was around Bill Burnett and Dave Evans' work around Odyssey planning, which is the design your life framework where you identify 3 potential ways your life could go forward. And we're kind of at that point. There's more we can do with that as we move forward. But I kind of shared my potential Odyssey plan of becoming a CEO of a sprawling educational media empire versus leading these boutique workshops with people that kind of find me more than like working to find them. So and we kind of joked about that. Samantha's talking about virtue ethics and the question of how we know whether or not we're doing the right thing. And Leslie's talking about patience and pacing. And, you know, at the beginning of the hour, I do think it's important really to remember, and I just want to avoid toxic positivity, that it's okay to have a bad week. It's okay to be depressed, anxious. These kinds of things are actually really powerful and can be powerful messengers. They're like sources, as Natalie Goldberg would say, to work through things like, so yes, that's the big catch up. I am curious about what people said with the Odyssey plans and what the experience of writing those was like.
I'll talk about mine, John, if that's cool with
Sure.
everybody.
And then it looks like Suzanne was going to get in there as well. Please, Candace.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess I started with where am I and kind of like what is actually going on.
Great.
If I'm to be honest with myself and where I am actually right now. And it was just a lot of like kind of in an eddy, like I'm trying to just keep my head above water with a lot of little jobs that I don't really like, and working for a lot of people, some of which I don't really like, doing things I don't like. So anyway, that's kind of where I was, and just being honest about that. And then kind of if I were to get spit out of this eddy and like actually start swimming in a different direction, I just went through, I really had 3 quick ones, like, well, I could be doing the same thing, but working for myself, which would be nice. Similar style of what I'm already doing. Or my second one was just kind of like dream world, like move to Santa Fe and paint and write books and do nothing. And then my third one was if I couldn't do what I'm doing now, it was kind of similar. I don't know. My 3 different lives were kind of different. Like my third one was become a life coach and a public speaker. But then mostly it was just talking about what my priority right now is surviving, which is not ideal. And then I went through what my priorities would be, like more free time, more spiritual wellness, more growth, more laughter, more joy. So then kind of moving into those priorities. And then I kind of just made a list of like, I listened to something recently about being in your integrity, and I can't remember who that is that did that, but I think it was like on an Oprah Super Soul something. But this woman writes about doing a year of just telling the truth and always being in alignment and in integrity within yourself. And so I kind of listed all my places in my life where I'm out of integrity and like not being honest with people about not liking the job, or not being honest with myself about not liking the job, and accepting jobs because of the money and not because I love them. So that's just not in alignment with myself. So anyway, I just went through and listed them. It was kind of cathartic. So that was nice.
That was a lot. Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
It was a
well
lot.
shared. I do want to say one thing that this came up this last year that I think is fascinating. Maslow's hierarchy of needs where we have our survival needs first, and then we start working up the list to self-actualization. It's kind of bullshit to think about that as a hierarchy. It's more of a network. And that basically, if you think of it as a hierarchy, that implies that people that are barely surviving can't work on self-actualization, which is kind of problematic.
Yeah.
So it might be, you might think about, even though, so you said, I'm like paying attention to the non-judgmental awareness. And you said, I'm just at a point where I'm just surviving, which isn't ideal. And I'm like, maybe that is ideal. Maybe that's not bad. Maybe just surviving is like, okay, given these other dimensions that you're working on at the same time, if you reframe it, which leads to a point of curiosity. How can I take this position that's just surviving and sucking, because it's fine to be honest that it's sucking, and work on self-actualization, self-respect, humor, my other virtues that I want to practice inside of that suck or alongside it. Potentially.
Yeah, I think Natalie Goldberg called that like a wholeness or something. I don't know.
Yes.
If I listened to the audiobook, which had like her extra commentary at the end of each chapter, and then the interview at the end. Yeah, she talked about like the wholeness. Yes, it's so good. It's much better than just reading it. And I love listening to her accent. She reminds me of like my older cousin from New York. So, yeah, it's like this wholeness, like you have, she's talking about writers and how they give excuses where they can't write for some reason because they have a ton of kids or they have all these things going on or they're struggling with money or whatever. And she said, but if something's important to you, there has to be a place for it somewhere in your life. And the quote unquote balance of how much percentage wise is going to change depending on your situation, but making place for the things that you want in your life, there's a way to make a place for it and to look at the wholeness of your life and always live the wholeness. It may be different proportions at different times, but there's always an element of survival of some kind, whether that's, mental, emotional, or financial, or spiritual, or something.
And the only other thing I'll say, the other cool thing about the life design is moving to Santa Fe and painting and writing books. Super insightful for why not just do that.
Yeah.
Not maybe moving to Santa Fe is a little extreme, but like moving out into a backyard to do some painting, like nothing stopping you there from buying some canvases. Or maybe, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Maybe you can integrate a little bit of that into your schema. Okay, cool. And thanks for the audiobook tip on Natalie Goldberg, Suzanne.
Yeah, it was so nice, so enjoyable. I mean, the quality of it is really like she's talking into a tape recorder, if anybody remembers tape recorders. But it's just so good because it's very raw, and I liked listening to it that way.
I would love to get deeper into her whole thing. I find her work incredibly refreshing every time I look at it. Suzanne?
Yeah, so I've done this exercise. I mean, I read the book when it first came out, and I did the exercise then. I wish I could find the writing of back then. I have to find the notebook. I have so many notebooks. It's in something to see what it was, that whatever 3 years ago, whenever that was. But because this is my work, I've done this with so many people, this type of exercise or version of this exercise. And of course I do it with myself constantly because it's just part of it. And but it's interesting because it's different even this time. Again, every time I do it, it's different. Yeah. So if things were the same, and how I interpreted that is if I kept going on the trajectory I'm going on, or that I intend to go on, doing the core of what I'm doing, I spent the most time on that one. Like I started with it and I just kept going and I'm like, this sounds fantastic. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of progress. Cause I'm pretty sure the last time I did this, which was probably 2 years ago, I did not feel that way. And I don't feel that way last week either. So I'm
Sorry.
because of last week I have more clarity about the direction. So that was helpful. I don't think last week I could have done this.
Hmm.
And then when I went into number
Awesome.
2, like the money or the status didn't matter. It was really the same thing, except I would jump into it faster. Like I would just jump without the hesitation, but it would be the same thing. So yeah. And it would be bigger. And it would be bigger. So yeah, it was, and then number 3 was like, oh, I came up with some stuff, but I'm like, I could do those. Like they didn't excite me.
Your and my response to the prompt was like 100% identical, at least in how it seemed.
That's funny.
And have you heard this? There's a phrase that the kids are using today: "Go big or go home."
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a joke, but yes, it's interesting to like. That's another point of curiosity. Is how could you, or what would it look like to just no hesitation? Dive in, like you were saying.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I'm going to be posing that for myself.
That
Go
leads
big.
to like,
Please,
that
Samantha.
leads to what Candace was saying about a year of saying yes. That's the same thing, no hesitation, just diving in.
Yeah. Yeah, my heart's like pounding, just honestly.
Thinking about it. Mine too.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I thought it was the coffee, but no, it's probably the real actual felt sense of what it would be like to just like super dive in to the process. Cause we're afraid of doing that. Like there's implications.
100%.
There's real fear that goes along with that, as evidenced in the kind of anxious response that's coming up. Kyle?
And completely, I won't say much because I know that my comments are very much out of context, but I'm still so glad that I got to join you all, just even if it's for a little while. Two separate conversations that I had yesterday, because my life is like in a spiral right now. My professional life is it's in an HR spiral. I mean, it's really hard to get up and get out of bed, in all honesty, but I do, because there are also awesome things to look forward to each day. But 2 very wise people yesterday literally said the same thing to me. Kyle, the universe is literally bashing your head against the wall. Why are you not listening? Like, why are you not listening? Like, what are you so afraid of? And so, this is a really hard week for me, but I'm getting to the point where, I think at the end of the week, I'll be I'll be jumping, right? I'll be diving right in. And it's scary. It's really, really scary, but you only live once.
So I'm interested in, what does it mean to listen? If the universe is bashing your head against the wall, do you get out of that? I mean, I feel like it's what does it mean to listen to that?
Yeah, for me, I can, what I can say is, because clearly I'm listening to a lot of different things and I'm listening to a lot of different people. I'm just choosing not to listen to this one particular message or this one particular piece of everything that's surrounding me. And so it's me listening to everything else, shifting away from that one thing because it's scary, right? And so taking the step back and rationalizing, right? Or taking the step back and being more, being more of a pragmatist. Well, I think that what I'm doing is I'm missing opportunities. I think that's really what's happening for me, is that I'm missing opportunities to really, do something big and bold. So I've got to listen, I've just got to start listening, and I've got to start doing it now.
I think this is so interesting, because I remember Jeannie bringing up, I think it was in our first class, just listening. That was a big thing Jeannie brought up. And then last week we talked about how we don't trust our gut or listen to ourselves because it's not validated by anybody else. Yeah. And then just what Samantha was saying about our own internal compass. Why do I need to walk around and ask 8 people if I should start my own business? Why don't I just listen to my gut? Because it's not enough. Like our own compass is not validated. It's not, like we're not reputable enough to listen to ourselves, right? Like, who am I to tell myself that this is the right way to go? So that's so interesting how much that tied into all the.
I sometimes think there's this other voice that's louder. And at least for me, my crisis last week was because of that. And the voice that was louder was from my past experiences saying, this is going to be too difficult. This is going to strain you. This is going to be something where you have conflict, and conflict is bad. And you're going to have to deal with difficult people, and like you're going to have less but there's these past experiences that did validate that, but I'm taking that as that's all experience, right? That's the only experience I'm ever going to have in the future. And I think that those voices are blocking, or at least were blocking the other voice. They're still fighting them, but it was completely blocking it. I couldn't see anything because it was just that automatic feeling that came up as soon as I thought about doing it. And it was because of my past conditioning. And I had to recognize specifically where those things were coming from. I had a contract with a school at one point, which I did some great work there, but it was traumatic for me in a lot of ways because I was dealing with things I hadn't dealt with before, but my body, soul, every piece of me remembers it. And the thought of me going and doing anything with a corporation or an institution just goes right back to that. And it was blocking me from hearing that that's the work I need to be doing. So I don't know what that is for other people, but that is definitely true for me. And that's true in my personal relationships and friendships and everything. I have found that there's always something that's screaming louder that we don't recognize because it's been screaming for so long, we don't even see it.
Well, this just brings up things for me about the delicate balance between being wise and being jaded, right? Because we have experience that gives us wisdom that's valuable, but how careful do we have to be not to be like every experience? And like, sometimes I just think about the decisions I made as a young person, right? You just did it and you didn't freaking care and it didn't matter. And sometimes it was amazing and sometimes it was so stupid, but you just did it and it was lovely. I miss those experiences of just saying yes without any context. And so as we get older, like it's hard to find the space between wisdom, jade, time. Like, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, it's true.
For me, this is all super interesting because I actually did it. Like I just quit a job that made more money than I ever imagined I would ever make in my entire life. And I don't have a job or a plan because this is what's helping me with that plan. And I'm sitting in a house that has like, a $2,000 mortgage. I feel like I should be a little more anxious, but I really loved this exercise because when we talked about things staying the same, and then when Suzanne said, when I did this 2 years ago, it was totally different. When I think about the same, like if things could have been the same as 2018 and nothing changed and our former president hadn't left, I would probably work another 3 to 5 years and then really actually truly retire. If things had stayed the same as like 2019, 2020, I could probably have held on. It would have been tough, but I would have made it happen. 2021, the universe banged my head against the wall and said, stop doing what you're doing. And so I did. And it was just that whole thing. There's just too much incongruence and dishonesty with who I am and my own integrity and my values that I couldn't keep doing it. And if I had to stay, I actually think it would kill me, maybe only in a, not for real, but it would just I would have been destroyed. I mean, I still feel like there's a lot of trauma around the amount of time I did stay. And it was kind of funny with number 2, like Jeannie used to give me really great money advice all the time and I didn't listen and I really regret it.
Hilarious because I have none. I'm moderately irresponsible with mine. So it's funny that you take it from me.
Well, I didn't. Like if I had though, if I would have done what you said, hey, put half of that away, I think where I would be right now, I'd actually be in number 2. Money wouldn't matter and I could do whatever the hell I wanted because I really don't care about appearances. Like I could go pour beer at Odell, or I could buy the van and drive around, but y'all young people, manage your money better. I mean, I'm not like destitute. I have money to retire, but I can't retire early. I'm gonna have to work until I can retire further. But then when you think about the number one being taken away, it actually was. Like, it wasn't in a real traditional sense, but I couldn't do the job the way that mattered to me. So number one really was taken away. So it's just really interesting. I don't know. I guess because number one has been taken away, that's why I'm here. I'm like trying to patiently work through the future while taking care of myself. And I'm in a really hard place with this stupid job that I should have quit on August 31st instead of December 31st. I had that option, and I instead thought, oh, it'd be so much better for the university if I stayed and helped them. F that. That was a huge mistake. So anyway, this is all good, and it's also like really hard, but those three questions were so clarifying about that I made the right decision. And sometimes you do jump and you land kind of hard and twist your ankles, but it's not permanent. So it was a great exercise. I really enjoyed it.
For the record, I'm the one who said to Kyle, the universe is bashing your head into the wall.
Thanks, Gina.
I love it.
I know Kyle really well, and so I know his trials. And anyway, it's just funny that has come up a couple times, and I could only speak on it because the universe has bashed my head into the wall before. And I think it's when we don't listen regularly, then it takes bigger, sometimes it's like, feels like bigger cues until you're just like, wow, okay, I hear you now.
Or the universe sends us friends like you. Yeah. And like the whole idea of this and being able to live our lives in community is the way we move forward. So he's lucky to have you.
Okay. I was gonna say Suzanne, go ahead. I'll go away.
No, I was done.
I was thinking, it seems like we're all sort of like in the same place, because I mean, Leslie, I didn't leave my job. My company lost me because of their toxic work environment. That's how I like to phrase it. So, it's like, whenever we always say, I left a job, I left something. No, that we left because that company was probably not for us. So the company lost me in the sense of it wasn't ready to have me. And that really changed my mind shift. And exactly what Kyle was saying, it is hard. It was hard doing the right thing. It was hard speaking up. And honestly, it's like, it's so difficult to do the right thing, especially when you've talked about it with other people, but you're still the only one standing up and speaking up. And that is hard, because it gets to a point where, for me, I realize I suffer a lot from moral injury. I'm very much about, it's not hard to do the right thing. It's harder to do the wrong thing. And whenever somebody is supposed to be a role model or a leader or CEO or a boss, and they don't do the right thing, for me, that is very difficult for me, because it's a case of you're not living your values, you're not walking the talk, and also you're giving a pass for everybody else to do the wrong thing. And I really struggle with that, because there's that choice between freedom and security. Security being in a job that you can survive, you can pay your rent, you can do this, but then you lose your freedom to be who you really are, because your mind has this burden. And then if you choose freedom, you probably don't have the security anymore, but your mind is at ease. But then it gets to a point where, when we do have security and freedom, we don't know what to do with it as well, because we're always struggling or trying to make the other two balance. And now it's like, there is no struggle, everything's fine, but we're trying to find something for it not to be fine, in order to justify our fear of not moving forward. And so the bashing of the wall reminded me of like last week when I wrote about the wind. So the bashing of the wall is like the wind. And then I think it was Suzanne mentioned the inner gut. It's like, it's the wind telling me go this way, but I'm fighting against it. It's the bashing of the wall saying, look, you know the answer. It's the inner gut telling you. So it's like, we're all at the crossroads. This is what we do.
So true. We're all right there, like staring at the path, like 8 directions.
But we all know we need to move, but it's like, I think we're also just all afraid to be moving.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, okay, here we go. This is what I love about the Designing Your Life framework, is that there is a way to move forward that tricks your brain away from the consequences that might otherwise immobilize us. So I'm not sure about going on this path because it might not work out. I'm going to face things that I'm like, all of these things, impediments, fear that might be coming, that comes up. There's a way to trick, to reframe it into a design problem.
Yes.
Where you want to fail at the outset. You're looking forward to it not working because that's going to give you more information to do the next thing. You don't know what that one is either. Now, instead of me being like, shit, I don't know what to do, it just becomes, okay, well, what can I play with? Who might I talk to? What experience might I set up for myself that I could fail at? This is why they end their book with failure immunity, because fail in that sense is just a faithful attempt in learning. So it basically turns into this growth mindset piece where I'm okay doing this because I know that it's going to give me some intel that I wouldn't be able to get otherwise. It keeps that kind of self-integrity. I'm doing this for this purpose and this reason. And no one can really touch me in that. It's okay if it doesn't work because I'm doing this for my own purposes and my own reasons. And I'm okay. This ties back to Suzanne, your point, the voice, the louder voice in your head saying from your past, this is going to be too difficult. This is going to engage with difficult people. There's going to be some things coming up that you don't want to deal with, so on and so forth. And all those are seen as negative because it induces stress.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe not. Maybe one, those blurts that you just want to get rid of. 2, you can really ask, is the difficulty really a bad thing? Or would the difficulty be kind of fun to play with? Is the difficulty going to be a learning experience? Like, how might I reframe this to be more empowering? And I think the huge way, basically moving forward, these Odyssey plans are meant to just be a conceptual and emotional starting point that then you can do some brainstorming, designing. Who could I talk to and what experiences might I generate for myself to give me some intel, some feedback, to get away from that kind of fear into a exploratory, playful attitude towards potential futures, which is kind of at the heart of this course, because at least for me, I don't know that we can figure these things out in the abstract. There's this sense that we have to try things and see what it's like.
I love, Sean, when you talk about bias to action, like
yes, that's it.
Move in the direction of something, like do something. There's a line from some movie that is hilarious, 80s film. That's just like, draw something resembling anything, like do something resembling anything. Like you can just do little tries.
And even still, when I'm saying that and I imagine myself doing that, I'm getting the anxiety rising. What if I don't do it right? What if I don't pick up the right thing? Do I have the courage to do this thing? Still a little fear around that, which is cool.
So I just had kind of a crazy aha, because I've been kind of fantasizing about quitting my jobs and telling them all like I can't work for them anymore. And in like visualizing what that looks like, I was like, oh, what if they just they offer me more money, like, and then I can't, like, it's not the point. The point is not to get more money. It's just, I don't want to do this anymore. And then my second thought was my even bigger fear. What if they don't fight to keep me? And then And then that worthiness issue of, wow, they're like, oh, we're good. We don't need you. And I'm like, oh my God, the fear of that is like so debilitating.
Yeah.
I would say if you decide to jump, have a little bit of a safety net set up beforehand, or at least a plan of what you're going to do. I didn't, and some of those things where I was like, oh crap. And I'll tell you right now, it's really hard to find a therapist or counselor right now. There is nobody with any capacity. Everyone's like, sorry, I'm full. Sorry, I'm full. But yeah, like think ahead a little bit. Like what is your self-care going to be if it's as hard as it might be? I think it's really wise that you've thought about that. You know, what if they really don't care if I leave? That's a tough one.
Oof, yeah, that one hurt.
It reminds me of Samantha's reframe that I didn't leave. They
Lost me.
They lost me.
Yeah, they lost me.
The other interesting thing, the self-care plan. I've been doing 2 talks with, her name is Jeanette Brunet. She's pretty.
Oh my God, I love her.
Did two clubhouse rooms with her.
Yeah.
She's incredible.
Yeah.
Basically, she says in self-care, I thought this was really insightful, is self-communication. So one, being mindful of the way that we talk to ourselves. There's a whole book on that now called Chatter. And Jim Lair has a great, we talked about that a little bit, but the story we tell ourselves, like, do we have an inner critic or an inner coach, and how to cultivate the inner coach more than the inner critic? The inner coach wants us to do well. Is going to encourage us to do well. The inner critic just cuts us down. So actually noticing when the inner critic is like, you bastard, don't be anxious. And the inner coach is like, okay, it's okay. You got this. Just have a sandwich, or whatever it is. So that's self-communication, is being, and then it leads to self-awareness, and they're not sequential, but they're connected. So this is the CARE, self-communication, self-awareness, and then this next one's really interesting, self-responsibility. We take responsibility for where we are. And then the last one is self-expression. We express what we need in our situation to the people that we need it to. So you're identifying how you're communicating with yourself. You're aware of where you are. You take responsibility for how you're feeling, and then you express what you need based on that. I thought that was really interesting, because I don't know if that is interesting. Oh, maybe
it is.
I sat in on that for a brief part of that, and I wasn't there for the whole thing, but I took away the idea of self-care as a brain space as opposed to an action.
Yeah.
Right? I remember taking a note about that.
Again, and she's trained in mindfulness, so a lot of this comes back to this non-reactive awareness. You've got to be willing to notice the inner critic or notice these patterns and not completely judge yourself for them, to be just like, that's interesting. I'm being an asshole to myself. Is that a bad thing? Good thing? I'll suspend judgment. Why am I being an asshole to myself? It's that one, it's this voice from something that I really don't, it opens up the door. So I heard today also, that there's a space between the stimulus and the response. Something happens and we respond to it. And that space in between that is where all the magic of transformation happens. So I'm noticing that I'm bummed out. How am I going to respond to that? Am I going to meet that with love and curiosity, or am I going to meet it with being bummed out? You get bummed out that you're bummed out. That's when I get really bummed out. It's the bummed out that I'm bummed out, that I'm bummed out, that I'm bummed out. Versus I'm bummed out and I'm curious about that. Kind of defeats now I'm still bummed out, but I'm also curious about why I'm bummed out. And now I can use my tools to continue to progress and change. So, Samantha, did you mean to just send that to me?
No, I just realized.
Okay, it didn't seem like it. Okay.
There we go. I don't know how to use this app on a phone.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so historically, this is the part of the course that people end up having problems with. 3 and 4 and 5, there's always like, there's challenges that come up. It's like the life cycle of a project. So I just want to be supportive if you have challenges that come up, especially when we start thinking about, I had my students do a variation of this exercise, the Odyssey plans, and a couple of them were like, that was terrible. And I'm like, really? And they're like, I'm anxious enough about my future. I don't need to actually think about where I'm going. And I'm like, whoa, I was trying to do the exact opposite of that. I was trying to like show you that you have a lot of options and that there's going to be things you don't need to figure it out. And it's okay to like completely fail at something and then do something else. And if you can like wrap your head around that, it's going to be easier. And they're like, no, I don't even want to think about it. This was terrible. I'm like, okay, sorry, just trying to help. So I just want to be aware, or at least that we're kind of moving into hopefully using our non-reactive awareness, being grounded in so we're having a presence of non-judgmental awareness, remembering our purpose. It might be worthwhile revisiting what we did in week 2 and really regrounding our compass. What is our purpose? What do we really care about? What is our good life on our dashboards and that kind of a thing? And then our attention. And now we're getting into this playful design. What kinds of generative experiences might we create for ourselves this week to kind of figure out some of these Odyssey plans? For Suzanne, it's almost like, and for me, since we're parallel in this, what does it look like to really commit or dive into something? What might I do like for 20 minutes? How can I take the pressure off and remove the fear valve and just like try something, just experiment? And then use that, again, we're deepening our noticing journal or whatever to continue with this. And that's really the gist, like the general aspect. What this course is trying to replicate is our ability to learn on our own terms. This is what I'm curious about. This is the kind of experience I want to generate for myself. These are the people I might talk to. This is the time duration that I'm setting for it, so that when it ends, I can stop and reflect and see how I want to proceed. Which is just like what we do in school. Here's the outcomes, here's the path, here's your resources, here's your grade. Except in the real life, no one's telling you what your path is, which promotes anxiety. You're not getting a grade, which promotes like, I don't know what the fuck's happening. So these are like big skills that we need to practice. This is what I'm curious about. I have a bias to action by trying these things out. This is how long it's going to last, 20 minutes, a week. This is when it ends. This is my reflection on it. I'm going to move forward into the next thing. That's like agency. Now we're learning how to learn in the real world of like our ability to try shit out. Which is why this is like really at the heart, that we're at like the midpoint of the class right now. Does anyone have any questions about moving forward or things that they want to? I still feel anxious about moving forward at this point. Like I also want to make this valuable for myself. Like I'm like, okay, this is it. Here we go. So that's kind of challenging.
Yeah.
I want to just be like, you know what, Sean? My coach is like, it's okay, buddy. Just have some fun. Take an artist date. Do your artist date in a way that is helpful to you. Reach out to some people. Make some phone calls to people you haven't talked to in a while, for God's sake. Yeah, we need merch. Yes. I have a list of bumper stickers and t-shirt ideas. So
Who are you taking roller skating better be on there?
ooh, that's a good one.
That was last week's discussion. It's all over my notes.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I saw and I walked through the philosophy hall yesterday for random synchronicity, and it's because it's It's the hallway right below the hallway that I'm in. So I'm in the English department, it's on the 3rd floor, and the philosophy department's on the 2nd floor. And when I moved from philosophy up to English, I told people I'm moving up in the world, which is a terrible joke. But there's a quote, a t-shirt that someone had at screen print that said, it had Nietzsche's face on it. And it said, I plumbed the depths of existence, and all I got was this t-shirt. Thought that might be like, you could do something like that.
So funny.
That's pretty good. But yeah, I really like, yeah, that's pretty good. That might be a good fun experiment. I could be a merchandiser.
Okay, what building is philosophy in? I need to walk down that hall. I love walking down the halls and just
Eddie.
seeing what people.
Eddie too.
Okay.
At
Alright.
2nd floor of Eddie.
Never miss physics either. I know it doesn't seem like those people would be funny, but they are funny. And
Oh, I love that.
walk down the physics hall, you'll die.
I appreciate that. I love that. That's why I love the life of the mind that the university offers, but a lot of the other stuff is not so good. Which is why we're here. Kristina, I want to make some room for you to be able to share, because I've just been blah, blah, blahing. You're good. Okay. This is a great group. It's inspiring. And it is interesting that we're in parallel taking leaps. I know Kyle is in this super big boat. He might be turning in his resignation by the end of the week.
We're going
Wow,
to
that's a
see a
big
great
deal.
concert before he does that.
Which one?
Leon Bridges at Red Rocks.
What?
Oh my gosh, you know the Red Rocks. Forgotten about that. Was in Colorado.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, we'll do a swap. Samantha, I'm coming to London. You come out here.
Yes, yes.
I
Yes.
would legitimately do a house swap, Samantha. Just let me know.
Definitely.
We
You
could
should
be
start
like
a club,
movie The
clubhouse.
Holiday.
You start a clubhouse
House
house
swap.
swaps or something like that.
I'm in. I'm putting that on my list of clubhouse rooms.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to say too, the one thing that's standing out for me is really big is like space and the gap and kind of being in that space and holding it and not being as afraid of it. And I was thinking about, you know, by letting our toxic things go, like the jobs that aren't working for us, we create so much more space for new and good to come in. Like nothing good can come in when you're just full of, you filled your space with stuff that's not working. So I'm really embracing that and trying to create some space and see what comes in. It could be really amazing just to say no thank you to a lot of this stuff and watch something else fly in that's better.
And be patient for that. I don't think, especially that doesn't happen on it, like that happens on its own time scale, right?
Right.
We might want that to happen like today or tomorrow, but it might be like 2 weeks from now. I tell the college students, like, it's okay. Like you can still like figure out what you're doing with your life when you're 26 or 27 or 37 or 39 or 65. Like it's okay. And they're like, that does not help me. I'm like, I don't know.
You know, it's really what came up is for me is when Candace spoke about, you know, leaving toxic things behind. And I just realized that we also need to forgive ourselves, self-forgiveness, because there can be a blame aspect in the sense of, I know when you said like, what if they don't fight to keep me? Especially if you kind of raise things or wanted things to change for the better. It's like, you start saying, don't they believe me? And then questioning, is being right wrong? Because how is it that they don't see this? And it ties into that virtue ethics and the moral injury. And I think it actually hurts us a lot more to leave something behind that we weren't ready to leave. And it, even though you can resign and be so happy, this really is the 7 stages of grief, and I'm experiencing that right now. I think it's actually really hit me when I got my final payment. It then hit me because like that's the chapter closed. And it hit me even more because I joined this company remotely and I left remotely, so I hadn't even seen anybody in person. So it's almost like they kind of just never existed.
Oh man.
So it's like I need to forgive myself and be like, yes, it hurt, but you did the right thing, and it's okay to feel hurt, but I also need to forgive myself as much as I forgive other people.
Wow.
Amazing, Samantha.
I feel like that's the same with relationships too. And
Yes.
big deal.
Again, and this is like all the realm of life stuff that we don't get in school, which is why, I mean, I hope this continues to be valuable, and this week is really powerful in terms of thinking about how we might take this further on our own. But it's okay if we don't take it further. It's okay to kind of sit with this and see what comes up. So let me know if I can help. Afternoons are generally good for me, but this is the kind of part of the semester. It's not a semester, part of the 7 weeks that it can be helpful to reach out and kind of debrief / think about moving forward. Again, I do think we learn a lot in conversation. We figure out who we are in community and in conversation. So I hope that I've created a welcoming enough environment for you to feel like you can reach out on email or phone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to, I'll send the prompts for this week as soon as this video uploads to YouTube, and we'll see you all next week. That was a
Thanks,
fun one
everyone.
again. Great
Thank
group.
you.
Really good
Bye,
group.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.